we're going to talk about the judging process, preparing a presentation, some tips and tricks for on the day, and then we'll go through any questions that you might have. So firstly, with the judging process, a slight change. If you've been involved with Science Blast before, you'll notice that the form that you get back from the judges at the end was very focused on the scientific method. So this year we're going to be incorporating critical thinking, creativity, collaboration and communication into that feedback form that you're going to get. So in terms of preparing your students to work with the judges, these are critical things to consider, that we don't necessarily, we want it to be conversational based. So we'll just go on to the next slide there. We want it to be conversational based. So if you want to do any sort of preparation with your students, a good thing is just even think, pair, share in the classroom with them and getting one of them to role play as the judge and the other one to role play, or not role play, to be the student. So just going through asking each other questions about their experience of completing the project. So we're going to keep it very conversational. The judges are going to have the same kind of briefing that you're going to have. So there's not going to be any surprises on the day. What we go through today is what the judges are going to be going through on the morning before they actually come down to meet your children. So something that is quite important, and just as a teacher sometimes, I didn't necessarily do this when I had classes, but the judges will come down and you'll have the students that tend to gravitate towards the judge straight away, and they could talk for 20 hours about their project with the judge. But if there's any students in the class that might be a little bit more reserved, or maybe have any sort of SEN needs, if you want to just have a quick conversation with the judge when they first approach your stand, and maybe flag any of those children, just to make sure that nobody gets left out, or that all of the additional needs are considered by the judge. And then involving as many students as possible. So again, keeping it conversational, there's more time for more students to be involved. So what we don't want is the students to have a script in front of them and for them to be quivering in their boots going, oh no, I can't read the word and the judge is here and I'm stressed. And that's the opposite of what we're looking for. So just to keep it, the judges are looking to know what they enjoyed, what they learned from the project. If there's parts missing, if it didn't go as planned, that's completely normal and that's to be expected. So you'll see yourself, if it's your first time attending, the kids will take it away, and they tend to, but there are some, especially for first time attendees, students or teachers sometimes feel the need to almost script it for the children, that they have to know everything. Not at all the case. So just a very friendly conversation with the judge. Also, it can be nice for the judge as well, and for the children alike, to have a quick chat about the judge's experience in science, and maybe why they decided to become a scientist or get involved in science in some way. So it's just something, again, with the chaos of the day, sometimes it can be forgotten about, but it's a nice opportunity for the children to meet somebody who's involved in science as part of their job. Then in terms of preparing your students, so we talked about the role playing, the conversation with them in class. The next important thing then is connecting the learning with their everyday lives. So again, this is something that we're going to be looking at we're going to be discussing with the judges. So how can they connect what they've learned to the world around them? And then the most important thing, the problems that they've encountered and the changes that they've had to make as a result. I was in a classroom today working on a project, and we had a digital meter that we were supposed to be using for an experiment, and an hour and a half in, we still couldn't get the thing to work. So there's going to be problems, and it's really, really a wonderful learning experience for the kids to understand that science isn't always okay, A plus B plus C equals, that it doesn't always work out as we've planned, that scientists might do experiments hundreds of times and still not get the result that they were hoping for. So that's an aspect that it's not to be avoided. I've often spoken to other teachers at the exhibition, that will say to me, oh, it didn't go, the experiment didn't work, and I'm really sorry we didn't do this, or this didn't work out as we planned. But that's wonderful, and it shows that it's really teaching the children what science is really like, as opposed to a glamorized version of it. So don't hide any problems. Don't be shying away from them. It's a great learning curve or learning experience for the kids. And then ideas for expanding the project further. So it's always wonderful to see the amazing work that goes in to preparing for Science Blast. But if you're sitting in your classroom today thinking, I haven't started to think about the display, never mind getting the experiment done with the children. If you don't cover everything that you said you would cover, that's fine. If you had to change things, that's fine. And the judges understand this as well. In terms of expanding it further, then, how can we integrate what we've learned with other curricular areas? And I'll talk more about this at the very end of the presentation. In terms of then, you might have children that are wondering, and they, especially children maybe with SEN, additional needs, sometimes it might be nice for them to know what they're going to expect if they're interacting with a judge. So specifically, if you have kids in that kind of grouping, these are some of the questions that you might go through with them. So what did they enjoy about doing the project? Did they learn anything new? How did they work as part of a team? Did anything not go according to plan? Even were there any aspects of the project they didn't enjoy? And how did you decide what to do when things didn't go according to plan? So you can be sure that the judges will talk about the scientific method and delve a little bit deeper in that area with the children. But for your children that might be a bit reserved and you still want them to engage, these are some nice kind of straightforward questions that they don't have to be on the spot and remembering lots of knowledge and facts for. So we'll move on next then to the science of the project. So in terms of what to cover, getting the students to do a little bit of research, maybe talking about the concept of research even with them. A lot of kids, by the time they get to third class plus, they'll be doing projects, and they'll know more about the internet and Google search than some of us will. But getting them to carry out a little bit of research, find out a few facts, asking them how to find out if their sources are reliable or not. So where did you find that information from? How could we tell if the information is reliable? Can we find another source that backs up that information? So they don't need to do buckets and buckets of research, just a few facts. If you've got buckets of research, excellent. But just getting them to start to think and start to work as researchers, making predictions then. So sometimes I've been in this case. I was in that case in the class today. I forgot to get them to make their prediction before they did their experiment. So if you've forgotten, it doesn't matter. Just discussing the concept and how and what it means, and then the materials that they used, and really focusing on what are the materials, what are the properties of the materials that they've used as well. How can you describe the materials? So again, integrating your oral language there in your descriptive language. So using their vocabulary to describe the different kinds of materials that they've used. Then their steps for the experiment. So getting them to bullet point their steps down, discussing the importance of the order of the steps that they had to follow, maybe chatting to them about how many times they might carry out an experiment. If they're collecting numerical data, how many times they might do the experiment. Will they try and find an average then? And then, so if it's your first time doing a science project with a class, you might not go into this level of detail, but some of you have been doing this for many years now. So the more detail you want to go into, fantastic. But just even touching on these concepts, if it's your first time, would already be a fantastic achievement. Then your findings. So what can they see with their eyes? Easiest way. Did they collect any data then? So how did they collect the data? And what kind of data is it? And what does it all mean? And what does it mean in the context of the wider world? So outside of their classroom environment, how does their science work in the real world, the big world around us? And then most importantly, did anything go wrong? What could you do differently if you were going to do this experiment next time? Or how could you expand on this experiment? So we'll move on to the next slide there. And just one more, Amy, sorry. Super. So for your display then, this is where a lot of teachers, and myself included when I first started out, used to get very stressed. And I used to think everything had to be typed up. It had to be all the same font. It had to be, and I went into teacher mode. And I very quickly realized the kids will enjoy the process a lot more if you leave the ownership in their hands, and they'll produce wonderful creative things that way. So in terms of the kinds of topics you might like to include for your display, some of the research and facts that the children came up with, predictions or guesswork, their methodology, their findings, their results, conclusion, what did they learn overall, and then the future work and problems. So what I haven't included there is what I haven't included there as well are the artwork, and that's going to, there's a design and make element, but any sort of artwork you want the displays to be as bright and as colorful as possible, and don't be afraid to include, if you are using this as a theme, if you have your project and you're using it as a theme for the month for your Kuntas Misula, don't be afraid to include other subject areas that the children have worked in. So, if one of the children has written a poem or written a story, there's plenty of space on the day where you can hang these other aspects of the children's work up and showcase them. And we really value that integrated learning and cross-curricular approach. So in terms of displaying your work, you'll have a board that is in and around the size of one of the bigger display boards that you would generally have in a classroom. Although I see presses that are a bit smaller, but one of the bigger ones that you would have in a classroom. You don't necessarily need to cover. A lot of teachers get very worried about the measurements of the board. So you don't necessarily need to cover the entire board with backing paper like you would if you were creating a display in your classroom. So what you might choose to do is get some A2 sheets, perhaps. They tend to be a good size for them to work in little groups in the classroom with. You can have a combination of handwritten work, typed work, or you might choose just one or the other. It can be different fonts. It doesn't matter. If you're thinking to yourself and you have that the teacher in you is coming out going, that's a different size to the other, it doesn't matter. And the judges won't even take that, they won't bat an eyelid. So please do not stress over your display. So this is just the first one. Lots of bright, colorful pages here. Amy, if you don't mind just moving on to the next one there for me. Great. And then here's one that's a little bit more formal. So the students in this group decided that they wanted to type everything. They created graphs using the computer to illustrate their data. They had some bar charts, some pie charts, but they also had, you can't really see it in the picture, lots of hand-drawn hands. And then they had some artwork there to go along with the typed work that they had. Do you mind going? Thank you. This one here, this is another good example of how you don't need to cover the whole board with background paper. You can if you want to, but I know that teachers tend to panic about this and say, oh, I don't have enough of the same color. The more colorful the display, it doesn't matter if there's a mixture, is what I'm saying. And you're starting to see here, having some sort of a model with you on the day, something that the children can interact with that come to your stand. What you don't want is to have 5 kids at it, or I'm not sure what the limit is, but a handful of kids at a time standing at the stand and nobody coming to talk to them except their judges. So kids will be kids, and the other kids will want to come to the stands where there's something that they can have a look at, even if it's just a model that the kids have made. And even the models in this picture were made out of very simple materials. I think there was a shoebox and a piece of cardboard, or some sort of artwork that will bring other kids to the stand. And maybe communicate with your students as well. Don't be afraid to ask other teachers and to ask other students that are nearby to come and see your work. So to invite them in to see. I've often spoken to teachers when I was in a judging capacity, where the kids were just standing and the teacher's standing. So don't be shy about it. You're there to show off the wonderful work that you've done with your kids. So do ask them to come by. This one is just another example here, very bright, very colorful. It is expensive to, you're getting the bus, you're buying material if you need materials for your experiments. So you don't need to put hundreds of euros into having fancy display paper and fancy card. Um, if you have some white A4 paper and some sugar paper even to back it on, it's great. Have the kids do some artwork, try to make it as bright as possible. And I think there's one more there, Amy. So just to show you the different kinds of displays that we've seen. So this one, again, a lot more formal, but then there's nice some nice artwork added in as well. We'll move on then to the design and make aspect. So you might be thinking to yourself, design and make, there's nothing really with my project that I can design and make something. If you can make some sort of a mini model, excellent. If you can't, is there some artwork that you can do? Is there some painting that the kids can do just to brighten up their display and bring in other kids and teachers so that they feel that they've had an audience aside from their judges on the day. This was just one that I did with a school group a couple of years back, and they did a project on water slides, and they made lots of mini models of water slides out of all the materials that they could find in their homes. So kids are very industrious, and they'll quite happily build and make things if it's for, as they hopefully they think, a good cause, to come to Science Blast. Then on the day, the buses, something that I forgot on several occasions was to bring sick bags on the buses. It's a hectic morning. You'll leave your house, you leave the school very early in a lot of cases to make it there on time. So that's one to note. If you are running late, please do not stress. It's going to be fine. Our judges are very understanding. If you're running late, um, don't stress about it. It's not the end of the world. The adult supervision and the safeguarding team then. So it might, if it's your first time attending, it might be a bit intimidating when you walk in. It's in a big hall. There's a lot of children there. There's a lot of adults, lots of teachers, but the RDS has an absolutely incredible safeguarding team in place. Kids will get lost. That's just the nature of working with kids in a big environment like this. Lots of kids, they'll wander off, they'll get distracted by projects. If you lose a child on the day, the safeguarding team will have that child located at the drop of a hat. So everybody is very used to working with children, and it's a very safe environment. And as a teacher, I really valued that about Science Blast. The adult supervision, though, I would recommend having just your teacher that is working on the project is probably not enough in terms of adult supervision. So having at least one backup adult that can do, runs to the different shows that are happening, different activities, bathroom breaks, lunch breaks, it just makes life a little bit easier. And then the white tack. So if you have white tack, it's much better than blue tack. The white tack, we try to keep the boards as clean as possible for each new event for the children, and the white tack doesn't leave the same kind of marks as the blue tack. So very specific, I know, but if you bought your blue tack, so be it. But if you haven't already invested in something that's sticky, also do invest in something that's sticky. So on the day you'll get your board, but you do need to bring something that you can actually stick up the material on your display with. So important to remember that. You'll have teachers that will be happy to share, but if you can bring it, great. If you haven't forgotten. Belongings then, would highly recommend you don't bring a lot. In terms like your kids don't bring a lot with them, that they have their little lunch bag, their drink and their lunch, and that's it really, because belongings do get lost. There's a very small space underneath the stand for belongings, so it's not conducive to big school bags. In terms of food as well on the day, I'll come back to the others. There are food stands, but I mean, they're primary school children, so I never, sometimes they would have brought money in the past, but we just didn't go to the food stands because as a teacher, obviously you go with one and they all want it. Now this is completely up to you. It's your own. It's, they're your students, not my students, but just if bringing packed lunches, if they are going to be going to the food stand, um, that they have their that they bring money if they don't have a lunch with them. Um, and then we have the wristbands. So the wristbands, Kira, can I check with you? Are they supposed to be on them before they arrive?
Yeah, so as I'm drowning slowly in consent forms that have been coming in for the past week or so, as I kind of sign off your consent forms, wristbands started going out, I think, on Monday. So some of you may have already received them. Ideally, everybody has their wristbands before they arrive. Obviously, there are issues sometimes with posting or with the Moonshore being sick and the consent forms not being collected. Please don't panic. If they haven't arrived to you by the time you're due to come to Simmons Court, you'll be able to pick them up from me at the registration desk when you arrive. Can I actually, Amy, while I'm just talking, can I just go back one little bit about the food trucks and
Yes.
the food? We strongly advise that all the children bring a picnic lunch. Now, we are very mindful of the fact that there are children who will just walk around the corner from their school to Simmons Court, and there are children who will be on a bus for many hours to get to Simmons Court, and their packed lunches could be gone before they even arrive to
Yeah.
Dublin. We really recommend that they bring their own food. There are food trucks on site. They're not really under our supervision, and so let's just say that they may not be price friendly to all the little people's wallets and purses. Okay, we are doing our best to provide cheaper alternatives, but quite honestly, you don't want a situation where there's always the child that brings 10 euros or 20 euros with them in the class, and then everybody else is kind of, hasn't got any money with them. So I would strongly recommend that they bring double the amount of food that they would probably normally bring to school to cover them for their journey times. And as I said, yeah, like the food trucks are there, but we would prefer that they brought their own food.
Definitely. And they will get very hungry because it's a busy day. So as Kira said, lots of food. And even as a teacher, I used to bring a box or two of cereal bars just as a backup for kids that lost their lunch or misplaced it or um arrived in the morning with having had a phone call from the principal to say, you need to be at the school, they're leaving now. So just to be prepared for that. Leaving early as well. So on the day I will be there. I'll be working with the judges on the day, and the judges just make sure that if you need to leave by a certain time, that you communicate that to your judge as early as possible. So as soon as the judge gets to your stand, I know some of you are traveling great distances to make it, and we are so delighted that you can come, but that you can't necessarily always stay until the end. So do make sure you communicate that with the judge, if you do need to leave early, and make sure that you don't leave without getting your feedback from the judge. And if the judge hasn't come to you organically, we can arrange for the judge to get to your stand if you do absolutely have to go. And then the last one just is a photo with your judge and your class. It can be such a busy day that sometimes people forget to take a picture of the wonderful work that the kids have done. Take a picture of the kids with the judge. A lot of judges will be only delighted to take a picture with your class. So it's just something I often forgot to do, and I think back now, I thought it would be nice to have had that. So that's it really in terms of then progressing your project further. Just from past experiences, one of the classes that I had, they did a project on microplastics. Um, they then created a little musical, sorry, and a drama about microplastic. It was called Baby Shark Saves the Sea. And they made all of the props and they did all of the artwork to go along with that. They then looked at the ethics of plastic use and entered the Young Philosopher Awards. And they were able to use all of the work that they did at Science Blast to present as part of their presentation for that as well. So be looking for other ways that you can, extend the learning further than the exhibition day, because you put so much work into your presentation. A very simple one is just having an assembly back at the school for the other students, and the kids really love well, from my experience anyway, the kids really love taking ownership over that, and showing off their work. The Tidy Towns Committee, if you have anything that is environment related, any of your local organizations, bringing them in to work with you, and to see the work that the kids are doing. And just for future years, if you're applying to Science Blast again, don't hesitate to reach out to a university, to reach out to local businesses, and get your students to write letters to people in government, as many people as you can, to ask them for support with your project. If you have time in the next 2 weeks to do that as well, wonderful. Don't feel like you're just in it alone. So that's all from me. I don't know if Ciara, if you have anything to add.
Really, I know, I can know from some of the names that I'm seeing popping up that some of you have participated many times in Science Blast before, and others, this is your very first time. Can I just say that if you have any questions, you can either, if you don't want to ask them today, you can just email me directly when you come off this, and I'll very happily answer. But as I always say, there's no stupid questions. There's no questions that I'll not have been asked at some point over the past 6 or 7 years. So if there's anything you want to know, I think one of the things that you might prepare your children for, as well as yourself, is that if it is your first time walking through the doors of Simmons Court, it is huge. It is absolutely huge, but it's completely safe. Amy alluded to our child safeguarding, and it's something that we obviously, you've seen the consent forms. We take really, really good care of your children once they arrive to us. There is nowhere for them to go. So if a child goes missing, it's missing within Simmons Court. There's no exits that they can get out of without that are not secured by our security team. I think as a teacher, you'll be surprised at how stress-free the day will be for you, because it's not the usual school day out where you spend your whole life counting heads to make sure you haven't lost anybody getting from A to B. There's really nowhere that they can get lost. And I think, we want you to enjoy the day as much as we want the children to enjoy the day, because if you don't have a good time, you won't come back with your next year's class. I don't honestly have anything else to say, but as Amy said, if you have any questions for either of us, please feel free to ask.
The only other thing I thought about is mobile phones. And again, this is up to you as a teacher, but I would recommend them being left at home for the purpose of the day. And if they are bringing their phones, that they're maybe asked not to take photos of other